out in the regular school system in grade 1. Then suddenly, one day in grade 3, my mother took me to a different school without me being asked. I said to her, "What's going on? Why am I going to a different school?" She said, "Oh, I got a paper. You have to go to a special school." And basically, my whole schooling was in a special school. My explanation, I can't think of any other, was that it was strictly a segregation process. It had nothing to do with ability or anything else. I think somebody's mother would go to the principal and say, "Look, I don't want Robert there to sit next to my Frank. He's going to pick up some bad habits. Robert's got lice, and he's full of all sorts of mischief that I don't want my son to copy."
When Robert's mother became ill in the 1970s and was hospitalized, the government stepped in once again. Against their parents' wishes, both boys were taken from their home and placed in what is referred to as orphanages.
I was very lucky that I got into a good home and had good people who worked there. There was worse life there. There was solitary confinement where they lock you up. There you will get for lunch 4 dumplings, but no meat, no TV, but mostly the punishment was in the form of food. I was in a good home, but what I hear from the other boys, they were in hell.
Ale já jsem to chyt špatně, protože já jsem byl, říkám, větší sičák než on.
It didn't go well for me. I was more of a mischievous kid, and they put me in a different home in Livichov, near Prague. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. I was almost 13. The first thing I noticed was that everyone had a shaved head. I was very taken aback. I went to the swimming pool with my class and said, "Bye-bye."
Yuri went into hiding, and it was over a year before his parents got permission for him to return home. In 1968, Robert's family finally settled in the Czech city of Pilsen. His father, Jura, was able to get a commercial driver's license and go into business for himself. He and Antonia traveled from town to town, sharpening knives out of the back of a truck, echoes of his gypsy heritage. The Kotlers were hopeful that at last their lives were improving. After finishing his education, Robert worked underground as a uranium miner. He married a Roma woman and began a family. In 1989, he set up a cleaning business in the Czech city of Pilsen. It was so successful that his brother Yuri joined him. Most of their employees were Roma.
I made a name for myself. I don't like to brag. We were cleaners for the Del Vida department store, and the manager knew that I employed Roma. The manager approached me and said, "I'm in awe. You've bought them all expensive lunches and cigarettes, and they do such an excellent job. Nothing disappears from here. How do you do it?" And I said, "You have to teach people that they'll be rewarded for a job well done."
Yet when Robert tried to arrange a dinner of appreciation for his workers at a nearby restaurant, he was asked if any Roma would be attending.
The manager of the restaurant discreetly asked me whether there were going to be Roma there. And I told him, "Yes, I'm having a reception for my workers." And he told me, "Please don't be angry, but my boss has forbidden any Roma to be served here."
Despite his success, Robert personally felt uncomfortable in non-Roma society.
When I would come home from grocery shopping, I'd bring in a big laundry basket of groceries, so the people were envious. One lady even accosted me, screaming that I was a pimp. I said, "No, I'm an entrepreneur." They couldn't understand how a gypsy could be a businessman and make a living. I had a new car, my apartment was renovated by an outside company, and they couldn't understand how that could be. They didn't like me for that reason. They would throw coffee grounds under the hood of my car and let the air out of my tires. That wasn't very pleasant.
The beginning of the so-called Velvet Revolution and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989 did not bring a better standard of living for Czechoslovakia's largest minority, its 300,000 Roma.
The Roma under the communists were used to getting work, but now things have gotten more complicated. Everybody has his own version of democracy. The Roma were not able to orient themselves as quickly as others in the new system. And in all aspects, they are losing and will lose for some time to come. Whoever has the most money and strongest elbows wins, and the Roma are not winning.
Hatred and violence erupted against the Roma. Anti-gypsy graffiti in day-glow colors covered city walls. Restaurants began posting signs, gypsies and dogs not allowed. Once a worker was discovered to have a Roma background, he or she was fired. Politicians campaigned on a platform of ridding the country of its Roma. And gangs of neo-Nazi skinheads took to roaming city streets searching for gypsy victims. In the Czech Republic, at least 30 people have been murdered in racially motivated assaults.
In the village, a little beyond Pilsen, called Stachlavy, there was a regular meeting of skinheads from all over Europe. And when they would publicize it on the TV, I would not let my wife and children go out. We did not go out at all. No Roma would dare to go out. In Pilsen, there were no murders, but in Wroclaw, they drowned a Roma woman, and in Moravia, there were several murders.
One is afraid to walk around the city alone because even during broad daylight, the skinheads attack. I'm not saying this happens every day, but sometimes if the skinheads see two Roma, and they are 5 or 10, they will attack the two Roma. You call the police to protect you. I don't know if the police are allied with the skinheads, but your story will not be heard. Never will be heard. The white will always be right.
I think back to what happened in the late 1950s and in the early 1960s in the United States, especially in the southern states, where the situation was not dissimilar. Segregated population clusters that had very little contact with one another, animosity, lynchings, Ku Klux Klan, conservative racist crimes, all of this. But what happened in the United States is that at a certain point, the federal government sent in the army, figuratively speaking. They said, well, we are not going to tolerate this any longer. In Slovakia, the government is afraid of alienating the white majority and paying the price for it election time.
The Roma in both the Czech Republic and Slovakia remain shocked at how lax the judicial system has been in bringing their attackers to justice.
Skutečně ty verdikty někdy těch soudců jsou.
Sometimes the verdicts are not only unfair, but facts are deliberately concealed. The evidence is delivered to the court by investigators and police who, either through unprofessional conduct or through intent, obscure the facts. For example, when a crime occurs, they don't follow leads immediately. They obscure facts and sometimes influence witnesses' testimony. These things do exist.
Robert and his brother Jiří began thinking of leaving the Czech Republic. For one thing, Their children were being harassed at school, just as they had been years before.
They called me a black girl, and they called me names. They said I have AIDS, and like that. They said that I'm dirty.
The Cheshirs weren't the only ones. In August 1997, Roma discovered that Czech citizens did not need a visa to enter Canada. Suddenly, plane loads of Roma arrived at Pearson International Airport. Most were granted political asylum by the Canadian government. Robert visited Canada during this time, but he still wasn't sure he wanted to immigrate, especially since it meant giving up his business and learning a new language. He returned to Pilsen.
Before I even put my suitcase down, TV Nova was there. I wanted to know what I thought and what I felt about Canada. And I told them that, you know, everyone who has left has done so for good reason.
Immediately, Robert began receiving death threats through the mail and by phone. His wife and his children were described as guerrillas. He was told that if he went to the police, he'd be killed.
After that, I didn't waste any time. I packed up the kids and we moved to my brother's house in the countryside. And meanwhile, I was selling off my possessions. I decided we have to leave now. Someone wants to destroy me. I don't know who. The police even told me it would be better if I left the country. So I took off.
Although they wanted a better life for their families, for Robert and Yuri, moving to a different country would present new difficulties. In February 2000, Robert, his brother Yuri, and their families arrived in Canada. It's been difficult for all of them to learn a new language, to start up their careers.
Moje děcka jsou třeba happy, jsou šťastní.
My kids are happy here,
Mě ne, protože
but not me.
za prvé tam
First of all, my father is lying in his grave.
leží tam
My
babička,
grandmother, aunts, uncles.
strejnové, tety, děda.
I can't get into a car and put a flower on their
Nemůžu
graves
sednout do auta
on All
prostě a
Saints
jít-
Day.
jít dát na hroboček kytku, když jsou dušičky.
It's simple things such as politeness from a maitre d' that the Roma immigrants to Canada have enjoyed the most.
You know, we couldn't get used to it at first. Some people around here are still too shy to go to a restaurant, even though here they could go anywhere. This is the sort of freedom you can't replace. It would be the worst punishment to go back. It will take at least 4 generations before people there realize that a minority has a right to exist. They must find a common language, like here in Canada.
Meanwhile, back in Robert and Yuri's ancestral village in Slovakia, the Roma must continue to endure with racism unimaginable in Canada.
I wish the white nation would finally recognize that we are people too, that we have a body and soul. Even the poor are human, whether their skin is black or brown.
For Robert and Yuri, and for hundreds of thousands of Roma in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, it will take time and effort to heal such deep wounds. But if not for them, then for future generations of Roma, the healing must begin. Or countless others